Good evening, Rabbi Isai. Today is Thursday, June 18th. We're going to review from Chullin Daf Mem Beis through Mem Tet, the last 8 blot actually. It's the beginning of Traifos, the third parak of Chullin, and we have many pictures, 85 slides. I'm going to share the screen. Okay, the third parak begins, Eilu Traifos of Behema, and it has a list of 18 Traifos. Machokas, if a Traifos can live. Everyone agrees that Traifa is not kosher. The question is, does the Traifa necessarily mean it's going to die, or it's Traifa anyway? And the more types of Traifos, Bas Gard got messed up over here, and Shav Shmaitis have more, which we will learn about. Okay, here's the Mishnah. These are the Traifos. And the first group are the Kavim, which is holes in different organs. So we have a hole in the vesh, the esophagus, the food tube, if you will. For Psukas Hagageres is the trachea, the windpipe, and that needs more than a hole. That needs to be psukas, which means cut off or severed. If there's a hole in the membrane of the brain, if there's a hole in the heart, here we have the heart, here's the veshet, and we'll talk more about these holes later. Then we have Nishra HaShedra. The Shedra is the spine, Nisaka Hutshala, and the spinal cord. Here we are, is what we're concerned about. The vertebrae, not so much, but the spinal cord, if it is severed, meaning there's a break in it, that's a big problem. Or some portion that's missing, that is a big problem. And then the Mishnah goes on with the whole list. The cover, the liver, the right of the lung, the mara is the spleen, the intestines, and the keres, apnimis, and the stomach, which we actually talked about in today's daf mem tet. And there's a difference between the keres apnimis, the inner stomach, and the chitona, or the outer stomach. Messes with besakosos, those are the other 2 of the 4 stomachs. And then there's a different sort of category, which is Nafal Magag, it's off the roof, or Jusa as an aid. And the Jusa has to be specifically by the aid. And Rashi says that there's poison involved. Fine. And we'll get back to that list in a second. Here's the basic cost of the hemsis opened up. And you see a lot of intricate designs that Hashem made. Okay, the host to Traifa collected. The Mishnah ends up Zakal, Kosh in Kamo, Chaya, Traifa. If it cannot live, it's a Traifa. And we learned this out from a pasuk. Rebel to Traifa, She'en Chayim in the Torah. And how do we know that a Traifa cannot live? It says, this is the living thing which is really chayachol, something is destined to live, then you can shecht and eat it. If it's not destined to live, you cannot shecht and eat it. He holds that something could be classified as treifa and still live. Of course, not kosher. Then he'll learn the pasuk with another twist, so to speak. This is the chaya you should eat, but don't eat the other type of living thing, which is treifa b'chal treifa chaya. The other man, the Omar, uses this pasuk for an interesting thing, that Zos HaChai Shatov Malamed, it teaches us, Hashem took every species of animal and showed it to Moshe, and he said to him, Zos HaChol, Zos HaChol, this you should eat, and this you should not eat. Of course, that goes along with the other Chazal, that the Moshe had the Moshe have such extensive knowledge of all the animals in the world? And the answer is Hashem brought him, Hashem informed him of the nature of all the animals. More types of Traifos, Baskar, and Shef Shmaitza. So the Gemara lists a whole bunch of more Traifos that should be in the list and asks why they're not. And the answer basically is that when we say the number 18, we mean to group several groups together. So one group, the biggest one, is Nekev, a whole in something. And here are these 8 Traifos which are listed in our Mishnah in detail, which all are possible because of a whole. So when the Mishnah said the number 18, all the ones with the whole were counted in that first folder. And the details which the Gemara, the additional Traifos that the Mishnah gives is an animal whose feet were cut off above the joint, which we learned is worse than on the bottom. On the bottom is worse actually. If there's a deficiency in the spine. Guluda, if it's flayed. Charusa, that's the shriveled lung. And then the 7 other is the thigh won't pop out, the shofin dichtei, and the socket, and luxo bakulia, if the kidney was diseased, chol, if the detailed chol of part of the spleen was taken away, commercial, the rule, most of the simon were detached, Echatel mekar, rupos, apruda, pervasive, velosha, nechpesa gruba, or the skull was mostly crushed, and also the meat that covers most of the carrot is damaged. And the Gemara again explains how these are all included in the 18. And here is a picture of many of the things which the mission discussed. Okay. Daf Mem Gimel. 2 holes which are not aligned in the crooked one of the vesh. If it's Yashav Lar Nimsa and the start of Turbas Avesh, the start of the veshes of the esophagus, we hold and the Makom Shechita or not. Okay, so Daf Mem Gimel. 2 holes which are not aligned. So Rabbi Yochanan says that if the 2 layers of the crooked one, as you can see in the heel of the crooked one, there's an outside layer over here, and then this little inside layer. So it could be there's a hole in the outside, the inside layer is good, or the opposite, the inside layer is punctured or ruptured, and the outside layer is intact. Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan said that if the outer one, with the kishalo, with the inner pocket, the outer one is punctured, but the inner one is intact, it's kosher. The question is the reverse. Nachman says, Nika Zed was that kosher. The only time it's bad is kosher. And there's a similar case by a vesh. That the esophagus, the food pipe, has 2 layers of membranes, the inside and the outside. As we saw earlier in the Sefta, the outside one is red and it's hard to find a home, and the inside one is white. Niki Zevul Kosher. Right? So we said similarly to Nachman Halacha that both have to have a hole in order for it to be possible. If only one of the holes kosher. The question is, let's say they both have a hole, but the holes are not next to each other. Shas Papa says the vesh kosher, crooked one possible. If it's by a esophagus, that's kosher. And the reason he says, because it's inside the animal, I guess. No, maybe not. Sorry. He doesn't give a reason. The crooked one possible, and with the crooked one it's possible. And the Gemara says it's throw the other way, that the vesh the esophagus, there's a lot of movement there. So maybe the holes will line up. It will be a problem. The korban is basically stationary. Here's nekef, shlok nekef. Here's the inner hole. Here's the outer hole. Fine. Yashba close to vesh, right? If a thorn became stuck in the veshet, in the isaf, the veshet, the isaf, right? Ain't close to shem right? So the thorns are stuck there. But maybe what happened is there was a hole in the heel. So the puncture marks are just sitting there. We're not considered that the outer layer was punctured and scab formed. If that was true, then scab is not good. It's not a good sign. The gemara asks a couple of questions why Ula is not worried, but other cases he is worried. What are the other cases he's worried? Suffolk Jews he's worried. The Suffolk Jews he should be worried. The gemara says he's not worried in Suffolk Jews in general. He can't eat. Husband's chatzisura. That's worse. That's why we're worried. Because over there it's chatzisura. Shavak Pesachim to the Huma, if you check with a knife and there's a big with a knife, we're worried because husband's yellow grace of Pesachim. Over there, there's a reason to be worried. But the kids are over here, he's not worried. Fine. Now, one Rabbanan was sitting in front of Rav Kana, and he and Ula saying nimtes, if a thorn was found. But let's say it was Aviyashav Cheshina. Let's say it was stuck in, then we are choshesh that maybe it punctured it and it healed. And if got the back, no, then don't listen to him because he was talking about even when it was wedged in there. Because if it wasn't wedged in there, if it was just nimtes, if it happened to be there, he wouldn't have to say it because we know animals eat thorns all the time, as we see in this picture. They're sitting around and they're eating thorns, which we know in the video, so we can't see. But in this picture, they're sitting around eating thorns. So that's not a chiddush. So that's not what we was talking about. It must be, it was talking about where Yasha, where you found it stuck in the flesh of the Veshet, and it's still good according to Ula. Turbat Veshet is an area in the beginning of the esophagus. So if there's a hole there, Rav says that it's a mashu, as we see in the chart, Shmuel says that's only possible road. Now the reasoning that was given is because Rav said that if mashu is possible, it causes the machum shchita. And Shmuel said no, it's just a random place in the body, it's not really considered the esophagus. Fine. Now a case happened where the guy started shechting. Shechita started in this place and then it finished in the Veshet. So Rav said, possible. Why? Because of the machmer, like Rav, that even the mashma is not good, and we machmer Shmuel that you didn't start a machmer shchita. And the Gemara basically, here's the Turbas Naveshin, sorry. The Gemara basically says you can't do that. Because you're taking the hummus of both, and you're not allowed to take the hummus of both, similar to one who takes the hummus of Veshama, and from Vetel, so-called Tzil Achoshe. What do you have to do? Either take all of Veshama and all of Vetel. Now the Gemara goes on a side point. How could you say you're taking all of Veshama? You said halach the Vetel. So the Gemara answers that was only after the Baskol said the halach was like this hill. So maybe a mashkich the Baskol, they will listen to Baskol or not. Anyway, the Gemara ends up that we misunderstood what Rav was talking about Turbat Vesh. He's really holds not machum shchita, but still it happens to be like other places in the body, even Masha who holds no good. In the Gemara before, Shmuel gave some guidelines about where's Turbat Vesh. Rav Papi said that it's different. Shmuel said, how do you tell Turbat Vesh? If you cut it and it expands like so. But it's going to come with the Vesh itself, and the Papi says that no, that's Turbat Vesh. And if the Vesh does know, when you we it shrinks together, gathers together. Fine, and here's also a case where vertebrae missing from the spine, is that considered a trait or not? So this will hold Bisham Hill by a behemoth. If you say that it's still not a Traifos, that's a Kula, but by a person, it will be a Chumrah. So you have to pick one or the other. Fine. And here is the Tan Shlach. And they're arguing. I hope the video does go through. I hope the audio goes through. The tree was uprooted from its place to prove he's right. And we end up saying that Lo Bashamayim, and the river is flowing upstream. And the Kofik measures begin to fall in. Okay, then down until how far down the nation may one shech on the bottom. The proprietor of Rav Baracham permitting a purchase to meet the Rav not permit. That's a good thing to do. The virtue of a road sheikh's latzmo, fine. Until how far down the nation may one shech. Now Nachman says that you could shech far down until a hand's grasp from the top. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. L'mayla kama. Let's start there again. How far up the nation may you shech? Until you can grab it. Until a hand's grasp from the top. And then we say lamata, below, at the end of the nation, on the bottom, which means down here, how much may you shech? And we say until Ashiyasir, until it gets a lot of hair, which is over here, which is clearly the end of the nation. Now the Gemara asks, so Shaila, we said Tevach Lebeisha, some of the Keres, at this area closest to the Keres, the last Tefach in the Beisha is called the Keres, by the stomach. So in this area over here, you wouldn't be allowed to shech. So the Gemara says no. What it means is Tefach the Keres, Samach Lebesha, Zel Keres Hapnim. Right? That last Tefach close of the Keres, close to the Vesha, this area is already called the Keres. But of course over here is called the Vesha. The Vesha. Alternatively, the Gemara gives another teretz that when Rav said the last Tefach of the Vesha is considered Keres Hapnimi, is talking when it becomes hairy further up on the Vesha itself. So if this is not here up, no, we don't have that picture, where the hair extends over here, that will be considered the Keres itself. Because this is really the lining of the stomach with the cilia, or whatever you call it, that absorbs the extra food, the food. But the propriety of Rav Barachan's permit and purchasing meat. So there was a case of Psuk Sangagas, a severed trachea, which, like we said, when we read the Mishnah, it has to be not just one hole, it has to be most of the cutting of the garger. So we said it's either rope of your rope halal, right? This is a not rope of your, this is a link to it. Fine. So there was a case that happened, and he was trying to determine if it was rope of here, which is the stricter view. Why? Because that includes the wall of the trachea. Rav Kanan of Ha'asi said that no, it's Rav Halol, most of the hollow inside. So he sent the question to Rabbi Chana, who permitted and purchased this meat. Right? So, right? Shadr L'Khan Rabbi Chana, Vodka Rav Halol of Action. Right? So the question is, right? How can you permit me if he asks it, right? So he said over here, he didn't answer. He didn't for sure answer. He didn't say 100% answer. He was looking and examining in a certain way they would answer. One second. Okay, so just to clarify, the two things, Rov Avi and Rov Chalola, we have a handy dandy chart, cursive and DY. So we see why Rov Avi is more machmer, because the trachea is not symmetrical from the top to the bottom. So if you start with Rov Avia, then that's the true center of the outside circle. So you have a smaller amount. Rov Chalol is more mekel, of course you have a lesser amount. So again, Rav was examining Rov Avia, and then he switched to Rov Chalol, based on the psak of Rabbi Chana. So, and the question was, how can you be master someone? Answer that he wasn't answering being brought again. The question, the follow-up question is that it was Mahim Shor B'Chacham. And the answer is that it's not really Mahim Shor B'Chacham. Right, we have this whole mice over here. The pasuk, I believe, it's from Yechezkel, who one of the things he said that himself, he didn't eat me, he was about to die, etc. Right? Because right? If it's a svara, so you don't want to eat from something that was passed on based on svara. Why? Because maybe tomorrow I'll come back and there'll be this svara and you'll be in trouble. But over here, Rabbi says no. The pasat is Rav Chalol. You see, Rav Chalol, you get more space, basically. The virtue of Haru of Sheikhul Asma, Chista said, who was Tam Chacham, Zeru of Sheikhul Asma, and his Machmer. Or the Joshua that said Haru of Sheikhul Asma means if you see on Chesron. And Darsh Bazil Chista, Chol Mishkori V'Shal Haru of Sheikhul Asma, Shirish Necham. You have to see it. Also, Shirish Necham is an important part. You have to know hands-on knowledge. You have to have hands-on knowledge of what the Tamei Chacham passed on. You say, right? The Gemara also brings, interestingly, that when they would send him stuff from the Beit Sia, then he would eat it. And when they would invite him, then he would not go because someone told Fichya and someone gave him a present. He's like, you're trying to kill me, something. Yeah, that wasn't good. Oh, okay. Are we start to hold in the trachea? We learn Nikif Shalach. We learn Nikif Alev Lebeis Kalolo and Kanei Halev and Chut Hashidush Nifta. Fine. So we said that the trachea is not possible unless it's mostly broken open. So if it's a bunch of little holes, are we the staff the holes or not? And we said the combination for some staff for some staff the ruba. Right? There's two types of holes really: a hole which something's missing, or a hole which is not missing, it's just a hole in the middle. But the rest, you can see the original anatomy is still there. So we say this is a matter of two staff of that if a whole strip was taken off, then obviously we're just saying it doesn't have to be the shape of a coin. The Isser, it has to be the amount. And here are holes, here's the Isser, so here's a bunch of little dots, and they add up to the Isser size. It doesn't just have to be the Isser itself. Fine. We learned in the Mishnah that if there is a hole in the membrane of the brain, then it's a Traifos, right? So Rav Shmuel says that's the upper membrane, and others say it's not Traifos until also underneath the lower membrane also has to be punctured. Vakapara talks about what's the moach. I'm sorry, here's first pictures of the protaston. That's the bottom membrane. Here's peeling back the upper one to get to the lower one. Here we are. Then we'll talk about the poem in a second, which is like kidneys is chutashidru. The question is to where there's the brain extent. How far down? Until when is the spinal cord, right? Because in moach, any bit that's missing is bad. The spinal cord only mostly gone is the problem. And Yeshua Levi explains, Kamin Shnei Polin, like two kidney beans, are at the edge of the cranium. From these beans inside, here's the pollen, here's the chutashidra. So from there into the cranium is the brain, otherwise it is the spinal cord. And this area itself is the shell. All right. The Mishnah taught, Nikale Kalof, a heart was punctured into its chamber, the animal the Traifos. The question is, Halal Katan Gadol, so here we have the picture of the heart. Here's the small chamber, here is a large chamber. And then what concludes that even the small chamber, if there's a hole, it's a problem. Now here is the pipe of the heart. The Amor's debate about its death. Right? So he says three main arteries, I guess. One, chapash liba, chapash aveh, chapash lehavda. So whatever the Knei Halev, the Shah is what is the Knei Halev, right? Again, we said over here, Knei Halev, Mamashnu, and Shmuel says Beruba, right? The question is, what is the Knei Halev? So we said there are three pipes on the heart. Fine. And that's what we're talking about by Knei Halev. We learned Chut HaShiddur Shenifta, right? The spine was broken and the spinal cord severed. It's a Traifos, right? Like the moth. Fine. So that's what Rebbe says. Rebbe says Shenifta Kurumo. And Rebbe Yasser says I feel Niki. He has a little hole. Right? Now, what does it mean? The majority, Nifta Kurumo, right? Rav says it means both most of its skin, and also most of the nerve tissue, right? There's stuff also on the spinal cord which is surrounding the nerves. not just a spinal cord itself. Fine. Now, if the nerve tissue was liquefied, then it's a traifos. If it was only soft and it's not traifos, it's not a traifos. There's nerve tissue around the spine. All right. Machlokas right now, traifos was a small amount of the liver remains. We have very exciting pictures. If you ever had Avshalom, which makes a hissing noise, and we put it in the water like a flat tire. We learn Reya Sheyev Shematasa, Eilu lung, which is partially dried out. Okay. The gemara says if the cover was taken, then it's a traifos. That implies the shtayim and the klum. If there was some left, it's kosher. Right? Now there's a different mishnah later on that a kazayas has to remain. Right? And the gemara brings a side thing that whether they consider the liver good or not, which people still do today, is liver good or liver bad. Fine. So the question is, this kazayas, let's say kazayas has to remain, is that in the place where it's attached to the gallbladder, or in the place where it's chayiv? Is it makamara or that's makom chayiv? Here is a regular liver, looks like liver. Here is the place where it's kazayas in the place of gallbladder. Here is kazayas in the place of the kidney. The kidney is like up there. That's machlokas in the gemara, makamara, and makom chayiv. Fine. And we say, nope, you should need Rapapa Paskin in the gemara, that you need both. Right? Right? Before we had machlokas, makamara, makom chayiv, and Rapapa says you need one next to kidneys and one next to the gallbladder. Here is where the kaved is just hanging loose. Fine. Lungs, which is a big part of Traifos. Okay, so there are there's the outer membrane and a lower membrane, right? So what does it mean if there's a hole along the bed? So Rav Shmuel Rav said a lot, and some say karma tisel, right? So we said if only the outer membrane is punctured, it protects. Fine. And this is based on the fact that if there's a hole, then we take it like a Rabbi Hilchson Megan. The outer layer does protect it, right? If you're not to self, it's not to be lost. If there's a hole in the bottom one, here's not below. Here is a little hole to solve, but the outer layer is protecting it. So here's the saw Megan, right? English to solve going to the law is the outside Megan. And the proof is it's based on what we say, what Rav Yosef said about a lung which makes the hissing noise. So if the source of the noise is known, you just put a feather on it. And if you see air escaping, it's a traifos. If you don't know where it comes from, you do like the spare tire, the flat tire, and you inflate it. If it bubbles, that's a traifos, because then you know that the outer membrane is punctured. If not, only the inner membrane is punctured and it's fine. Okay, a lung with dried parsh is a traifos. What is being dried up? So he says they should profit spawn if it crumbles when you scratch with a fingernail. That we had a similar discussion by an ear, and the Tana comments over there. If there's a hole and blood comes out, I'm sorry, the animal tip is done, right? If there's a hole and blood doesn't come out, it means it's very dry, right? And then we said, no, maybe it's different. The ear of a bahar, the air affects the ear, so therefore it's not going to moisten up. But a lung may indeed moisten up. And here is different kinds of dried lungs. All right, here we go. Mercaz, along with an extra loaf. There's colored lungs. There are nothing guidance for Mila, discolored infants, and Reish Nishla Kitzon. Fine. A lung with extra lobe, so the anatomy of the lung is as such. This is called the right side, goes upside down. So there's three, there's umas, and there's unas. There's three unas on this side, two on this side. There's the trachea, and there's the uma on the bottom. Fine. And again, the right is called the left, so the animals hang upside down. So if there's an extra lobe on the left, then it's bad. There's an interesting story that Rav Acha was sitting by the door of Marimar, and Marimar said kosher, and Rav Acha said to the person left, go back and ask him again if it's kosher or not. And when he did, Marimar said, go back and tell the person who's telling you to go back in, the halacha is not regarding an extra loaf. Here's different things. Okay. And that halacha is only when in the rows of loaves. So it's between the rows, here is a good example. Mainly tracing, right? If it's hanging out like over there in a weird place, then it is not kosher. This colored lumps, right? Kufla. If a lump is blue, it's kosher. If it's black, that's not kosher. Why? Because the black means that it's really red. It's red blood, which dried up. And if there was a lot of blood there, it means there was a problem there. There's two regarding the color of skin with blood. There's more, brings two stories. Nothing said that once he went far away to the islands, and a woman came, and her first two kids had died, unfortunately, with a bris milah, and the third one, she brought and he was red. And he said, wait until he reabsorbs his excess blood, and it worked, and the kid lived, and they called him Nafsabavli because of that. And there was another time he went to Kutkia, and the woman came, and again, their first two kids died because of the bris milah, after the bris milah, and he was green. So he said, wait until his blood comes in, right? And again, the kid lived, and she was very thankful for that. Fine. Rabbi Yochanan said, a lump was dissolved, right? And can be poured like water is kosher, right? So this shows that he holds Chisom Shufnim Lo shmei chisaron. An internal chisaron is not a chisaron. And he asked the kasha from the Mishnah, which is Harayish and Nikva Osha Chasra, right? That's the Amshas there. So, what does it mean? Chasra doesn't mean outside, because that's what Nikva means. It means inside. And it means it is the Chisaron. I'm sorry, Shmei Chisaron, it means it's a crowd, right? And the Gemara says, no, both of them referring to outside, only B'chutz, it's referring to Chisaron on the outside. Rav Shimon says a punctured lung is not a problem until it's punctured in the base of the components, which is the bronchi. Fine. Okay. So now we have some components over here with all the way to the bronchi, the little fellows over there. This is a knife pointing at the bronchi. Okay, mercaz. When it's finished, a lung which is stuck to the chest wall, which is a lot of what the shoftim are checking for these days, whether it is a concern for puncture, when the chest wall conceal a hole in the lung, and mercaz shenimtzas bereya, and the needle which is found in the lung, and of course, we bring that also the often quoted case of mercaz shenimtzas bereya. Fine. All right. Now, if a lung is attached to the chest wall, that we are not concerned the lung was punctured and the leaking fluid was attached to the wall, we assume that the chest wall is punctured. But if the blisters develop, then we are concerned that something bad happened to the lung. And Avini argues, says, in both cases, that we're nervous about it. How do you do it? You take a sakina chosh, which means a sharp knife, chosh pum, which is a sharp knife from frakinula, and you take it apart. Fine. And we see if there's a raise in the wall, the dolphin, then we tell him the dolphin because you see something happen to the wall, or else we assume that's a problem in the lung. And of course, if there are two non-adjacent lobes which are attached, then you got a big problem. Okay, here's the tzmach and mercaz. So if you see a blister on the lung, it's a problem. Fine. Now, sometimes the chest wall conceal a hole in the lung, right? Okay, here's the thing we were talking about before. If there's two lobes, which we don't have a picture of, I think, which are stuck together, no, we don't have a picture of it. If two lobes are stuck together, it's a big problem because something's going on with the lung. One second. Fine. So there are some times that a chest wall conceal a punctured lung, and sometimes it can't. And the question is it a place of growth or not? What does that mean? Makom not makom. Here is makom, it's sealing a hole in the lung. Here's the lung, same lung fellows. And here it's tight against the skin. And over here, just further down the amish, lo makom loose against the skin. So this seal is not going to remain, it's going to move around. Fine. Oh, we don't have a picture of the lung. If a needle is found in the lung, right? Some say it's kosher, and some say it's treif. Right? First, the Gemara says, the Machlokas says, well, some of them finish mechisam. Right? And we said, no. Really, everyone agrees an internal deficiency. Internal chisam is not chisam. Here, the argument is, Masa or Sapolanaka, Masai, Masa, and Kuminaka Masai. Right? how did it get here, right? So if it came through the vessels of the lung from the trachea, that's just going on the inside, it's fine. But if you're machmer and you say Nakuri Nakavasoid, that made a hole that came through the food tube, esophagus, and that's how it came into the lung, so that would be a big problem. Today's daf test. If the lungs can function in a place where butcher hands left the shechita, what do? We learn Shema Sai Kahani, that's interesting. It has to do with the covering of the stomach, and can Chilus tummy steal a puncture? No. Okay. If the lungs can function in a place which your butcher handles after shechita, in Kvarev, there's a hole where the butcher handles it, talin or talin. So I would say, or maybe you would say, that because the guy's sticking his fingers and he's making a hole. So it's machokas is whether we say it's attributable to the butcher's hand, or we think that there was a hole there before. This is similar to the case of the eighth, where the wolf took the intestines after shechita, a case we had before. There's a different question about a parasha worm, which is found with a hole. So there is a source to say that it only makes a hole after the animal is dead, which is fine, because when the animal's alive, it just lives off. That's parasitic, so just the parasite lives off the living animal. It doesn't have to live for food. Here is the wolf, which took the parts and replaced them. Right, going and show the hole. And put the parts back. Fine. Okay. Oshia said, here is the chalev, right? And it's on top of the various parts. Doesn't show the kiva here, I believe. Fine. So the question is, if the kohen allowed to eat it, they're only allowed to eat it if you don't bring it as a carbon on the mizbeach. So Rabbi Shmuel said they're allowed to eat it, which means there's much to eat for everybody, by regular behemoth. But in the case of a carbon, since it's not on the mizbeach, the kohen allowed to eat it. So that friendly is the kohen. They called Yishmael Kahan Messiah. Yishmael Kahan. Yishmael was Kohen, I think, or Kohen. And he was Messiah, the Kohen. He helped that Kohen because he gave them this extra chil to eat. What the chil? And the reason why it's called helping the Kohen, besides this, is because he dashed in the pasuk, that means Hashem blessed the Kohen. Usually the way you read the pasuk is that the Kohen should bless the Jews and Hashem will also bless the Israelis. Right? He said Kohanim, but really the way we will read the pasuk, or Aki reads the pasuk, is then the Gemara brings a more detailed focus. Rabbi Shmuel said B'Shem Avosov, and he went into detail about these sheep. Fine. Karen feels tummy seal puncture. So Rav said the rule feels tahar does seal a puncture and prevents the animal from becoming traifos. But feels tummy does. Rav Sheshes says it does by even feels tummy, even forbidden chil. The question is, chilus chaya is tar, right? The fat of a chaya is tar. So would that close the holes or not? The reason you might think, I guess, to close the holes before the tar, and after the rule of tar closes the hole, and then advice to that, no. Granted, you'll have to eat it, but the characteristics of it are the same as the chil time behel, and the Rav's rule of chil tar sosim is talking about the type of fat which is tar. So also by a chaya, the only the type of fat which is tar by behemoth would seal all the chil's tummy, which the fat which on the body of the behemoth would seal will be tummy, then we know that doesn't seal the hole. And that is it. Have a great day.